Hello and welcome, Mark here, and in this episode we're going to talk about tension. Now, over the decades I've been knitting and crocheting, I've heard two terms, or should I say two comments that come up across to me many a time, and that is, one, making a tension square is either boring or a waste of time. Two, it's a waste of yarn. Now I can answer the second one right now, and it's not a waste of yarn because you could use your swatch for different things. You could definitely unpick it. You might have to unpick it to finish the project. You could use the yarn for sewing it together if it's pieces that need joining together to make something wearable. You can also take it apart and use it as scrap yarn. So you can use it as a lifeline. You could use it for putting live stitches on if you don't have a stitch holder. So there's always use for it. So it doesn't waste yarn. That's what I wanted to say there, really. And as for the first question, that people always often say is that it is a waste of time. And that's what I'm going to be answering in this video today. So let's get to it. Right, I'm going to be using this little sample I made a couple of weeks ago. It's not really big enough, but I'm just going to show it as so you can see what roughly I'm talking about. So before I start, I've just got some things written down and I want to read them word for word so I don't miss anything. So first things first, first point. At the beginning of any knitting pattern, the designer will state the tension needed to achieve success. Right? And to achieve success, meaning that if you're a loose knitter or a tight knitter, your finished piece will not look right. It would be a disaster. Right? That is the main thing for making your tension squares or gauge, depending on where you're from. Now, ideally, this is not big enough, but you're casting on just to make a stocking stitch or stockinette stitch wherever you're from. You would normally cast on the number of stitches it states plus 10 extra. So you end up with quite a lot of stitches there, really, don't you? And also work somewhere between 6 to 10 extra rows. So you would end up with a swatch quite big, because the only stitches they're interested in when you're working is all these in the middle. So we'll get down to how we normally would count it now. Now this hasn't got enough stitches in it, but you will find your end one there, and if you've added all those extra stitches, you would actually go in 3 or 4 stitches before you would place your pin. But since this isn't big enough, I'm just going to place the pin there. That's taking away the edge stitch there. Then you would take your trusty little ruler, line it up with that pin, go across your work and place another pin where it says 10 centimeters. Once you've done that, you can keep your ruler there. It helps to keep it straight. And then you would count your stitches one by one. Can't see if I'm doing it properly with the camera. One by one across the row to count how many stitches you have for that 10 centimeters. And you would write that down. Then you would turn your work onto its side, that's how I like to do it anyway, and you would go 3 or 4 rows up before you place your pin, because you don't want your cast on edges or your cast off edges. You only want the stitches in the middle. So because I know this isn't really big enough, I'll just place a pin there, and you can use centimetres or inches, depends on which way you prefer to count. Line that up, place your second pin where it says 4 inches. Right. That's about right there, isn't it? It's not easy working around the camera, sorry. And then you would count your rows, you know, as you go up. 1, 2, 3, 4, and you would continue to count your rows up to there, and then write that total number down. And then that will tell you what your gauge is. Your gauge, not the designer's gauge, but your gauge. So then you've got that, you can know then which direction you need to go. That's if you've made a piece like this. Just take those pins down. This is why I like to make my tension squares like this. You have your stockinette already in the middle of your border. So all you need to do then is just count your stitches and your rows in the middle. Helps it to lay flat, and I just find it easier to do the counting that way. Now, as you know, if you watched the video a couple of weeks ago, I had 18 stitches on it because that's what it said on the yarn band. 18 stitches and 26 rows. So you can either use a ruler, and this time you can go right to the edge of that stitch because you're not on the edge of the work. And look, mine's going over a little bit there. You can see that? I've got it right to the edge there. Right. And I actually, if you place the pin at the 10 centimetres, actually it's just a little bit off, but there you go. I think I've actually, yeah, it's about right there. Right. And as you can see, I'm at least 1 stitch short. I know I did 18 on here, so with 1 taken off, my stitch count, sorry, is 17. So that's a little bit off, isn't it? It's not enough. Turn it around. Do it that way. 10 centimetres again, or if you prefer, you can try and get it to 4 inches. That's about 4 inches there. And I ended up working 27 rows actually, because one of the rows was part of this. So you can just count the rows down. 1, 2, 3. I'm 3rd row down. So really my row count is 24. So again, that's not enough. So I shall tell you what it says. I've written it down so I don't forget anything. Right, where is it? There it is. If you don't have enough stitches and rows, then your stitches are too big. So you are a loose knitter. You would have to go down a needle size. So in other words, you would have to use a smaller needle. So I made these on 5mm needles. Don't know if you can see that. 5mm needles. So I would have to go down to a 4.5mm and make it again, and then remeasure. Now if you get the opposite effect, 10 centimetres takes you over your rib, then you are having too many stitches. Same again, if you measure it that way, and you're actually trying to bring it down a bit, and you end up there, you're on the ribbed area, that means you have too many rows. So if you have too many stitches and too many rows, it's the opposite. So it's got here, if you have too many stitches and too many rows, your stitches are too small, and therefore you will need to use a bigger needle. And you'll make your swatch again, do all the counting, use either something like this, which you could just put that there like that, and count your stitches. I have 17 stitches across here because I've already counted them. and then you can lay it flat on there like that. Count your rows, and I have 24 rows because I've already pre-counted them just to save time for the video. So I'm a looser knitter, which I've known that for years anyway, but this tells you what kind of knitter you are. When you're making your gauges and your tension squares, it tells you whether you're a loose knitter or a tight knitter, and it will also say then if you're a loose knitter you need to go to a smaller needle, and if you're a tighter knitter you need to go to a bigger needle. Some people think that they need to try and alter their tension, they need to alter the way they hold the yarn, alter the way they hold their needles, to try and make it so they don't have to change needle sizes. That can also lead to a little bit of a disaster, because halfway through your knitting you might forget and start knitting in the normal way, and then it will just look a funny shape. So it's always better to make a swatch, count your stitches, and then determine what size needle you use, because the needle size, they say, is variable. You don't have to use that needle size. You use the needle size you need to gain the tension and gauge you need to make success of what you're making. And that's basically the answer to that question. Is making a swatch a waste of time? No, it isn't, because it answers so many questions, and it will also help you in the long run. Because if you make something, like if I carried on making the item on the 5mm needles, my item would be too wide, too long, and it would look awful. It wouldn't look right at all. And if you're a tight knitter, then your item will be too small and it won't fit. So that's the point in getting correct gauge, getting your tension so it's perfect for that piece that you're making. So there you go. That is why we make tension squares or swatches or gauge, whatever you like to call them. It's so you can achieve success in what you're making, because you don't want to have to start, you don't want to make a project and find out that it's either too big or too small, too long, too short. You want to get it right, and getting it right the first time is the thing you want to do, the sums up thing you need to do, because the last thing you want to do is have to rip it all out and start again. So there you go. That is the importance of making your tension squares. So I hope you found all this informative. I hope I haven't babbled on too much. So thank you for watching, and until next time here on Marks Makes, bye.